Good afternoon, Tim.
Hey, Jason. Good to see you.
Good to see you. You just took your glasses off and said, good to see you. There's some irony there. I don't know what it is, but there is an irony there.
I can see you better this way.
Oh, okay. All right. Those help you with the readers, right? Like getting close in. Is that what it is?
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah,
got you.
that's
Well, I'm full-time glasses, so I have no options here. Um, all right. Looks like podcast number 7. We're climbing that mountain. I'm thinking that's pretty strong. Um, the last podcast got some great reviews. I'm very happy to see that. Of course, you can always see the podcast at alccoaches.com and then also on the YouTube channel at ALC Coaches. So those are some great places to find the podcast. Today, we've got something even more different from the last podcast we did. Today, we're going to have Tim walk us through using a tool that he uses called the Leadership Circle Profile. And I get to be the hamster in the hamster wheel today. And we're actually going to, at the end of this, well, towards the end, take a look at mine and discuss a year ago what my results look like, and then ultimately what we've been working on together to improve my leadership skills. So I think what we'd like to do today for you, Tim, is to just kind of turn it over to you again, let you go through some of the education of what we want to talk about today and how we get to the results. And then from there, we can have, a great discussion about what a leader I am and believe that good, bad, and different leadership skills I have towards the end. So let me pass it over to you, and maybe we can get some education here for the next few minutes.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, so I think you're probably going to be taking some risks with this, putting yourself out there with all your dirty laundry, so to speak, and
right.
I think it'll be good. I think we'll have some opportunities here to understand this tool better in a real life application and what works for an individual like Jason in his leadership, his quest to be a better leader and his leadership approach. And so we'll spend some time understanding this tool, give you a quick overview. We aren't going to take a lot of time. I could spend hours talking about this and get into the details and the history and all the research that's gone into developing this tool. It's a very deep tool, but yet on the surface, it can be used in a powerful way as well. So this is, I'm really excited about this tool. I use it quite a bit. It's not the only tool that we use, but it is the tool that many times we lead with, which is great. So I'm going to share a slide deck here. It's not too many slides, but it'll give some visual and give us a perspective as to what this tool is about. So I'll put it on slide view. There we go.
Perfect.
So Jason, as you have comments, please jump in.
Okay.
You've been working with this now for more than a year. You've got some ideas and thoughts as well. So please don't hesitate. So
Okay.
this, I'm calling this sort of a coaching approach. We're going to talk about the stages of adult development, which is directly tied to the development of this tool. And this tool the name of it is Leadership Circle Profile, and it really hones in and focuses in on the leadership effectiveness. And so with that, we'll jump in. So I think we may have talked about this a little bit, maybe early on in one of the podcasts, maybe podcast 1 or 2, but I wanted to just review what coaching is and what it's not. And as we think about what coaching is, life-changing experience, it unlocks or opens up people to growth and development, creativity, greater productivity. It creates clarity. It moves people to action. All these things this tool does. This tool creates this opportunity to really sort of jumpstart coaching. It helps us right off the bat create greater self-awareness. And that's what coaching is really about. creating these possibilities for us that lead us to our next steps in our development. Now, coaching is not therapy. It is not consulting. It is maybe somewhere in the middle of those. But another piece of this is not easy. Making transformational changes and changes in our perspectives and becoming more self-aware, it's hard work. And it's not an easy thing to do, and not for that faint of heart. Maybe that's a good way to put it. Jason, I know you've gone through a lot of changes over the last year as we've coached and used this tool.
I have a lot of soul searching, a lot of practice, a lot of review, and obviously, I'm a big fan of this because I think it's made me a better, not just a better leader, but a better person.
Yeah, great, excellent. And that's the hope, is that we become better all around. So let's jump in. Stages of adult development. So, as we get into our adult years, there is a way in which we learn. Now, this is a theory, so this isn't absolute truth. Now, when we apply it and we talk with individuals, it's an application for us. But in theory, it provides us a basis for thinking. And as we move from bottom to top, egocentric, reactive, creative, integral, unitive, as we move up the scale, as we grow and learn, we become more effective as leaders. We have an increased capacity to learn and to grow. We progressively become more inclusive of other people, and we have a greater capacity for complexity to handle it. So let's start at the bottom. Less than 5% of our leaders are in this role or in this stage of being or a way of being as egocentric. And this is really termed as sort of my way or the highway. It is autocratic. It is all about the individual, totally controlling. They demand loyalty. That's the space that an egocentric leader is in. Reactive, 70% of the leaders in the world are in a reactive type stage. And this is defined from the outside in. It's about external validation. It's driven by fear. And as we talk more about the tool, we'll get into the details of that. But it identifies with a certain way of being, and that is about I. I am about my work. I am my home. I am my family. I'm my car. I'm my job. I'm my whatever. It's defined externally from the outside in. So I seek this validation. And that's sort of the idea around reactive. As we move from reactive to creative, that's a huge change. And it's why 70% of leaders stay in reactive and not many move up to creative. 20% of the world's leaders are in the creative space. This is defined from the inside out. So I've had some learning, some growth. I gain by sharing. This is about love, and it's about we and us, versus reactive being about I, and egocentric certainly is about I. You can handle greater complexity at creative versus reactive. It's about passion. It's about love. It's high engagement with other people. So you can see a big difference in this reactive and creative stages. And as we move further up the scale, becomes true servant leadership. It becomes all about a larger vision, a larger system, more about community. It's compassion. And as we move up further the scale, it becomes more spiritually evolved. And, I think of in the integral and unitive people like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, Gandhi, individuals that have this much broader perspective. And the other part about this creative integral unit, we can hold complexities. You can hold different perspectives, contradictions even, light and dark. We can hold those at the same time and be okay with that. And that is one of the interesting things where if you think about egocentric and reactive, it's one way. I see things through one world and one set of eyes. As we move further up the scale, we have this idea that we can handle greater complexity. So, all right, so great. This is a wonderful idea and concept, but how does that apply? Well, as we go to thinking about this leadership circle profile, the circle just came up on the screen. It is centralized right smack dab in the middle of creative and reactive. And so the competencies and the tendencies that we have of creative and reactive are what are on this leadership circle profile. And so we'll spend some time going into that. So this leadership circle profile, or LCP as we call it, it's a 360 assessment, meaning that we have we do our own assessment, and then we have people around us assess us as well. And as leaders, we would have bosses, bosses, we'd have peers, and we'd have those direct reports and some other folks around us. And that is what would comprise this 360 perspective. They fill out the assessment. This is all about developmental purposes. That's what this is for. But the idea is that this just jumpstarts the coaching process. It gets us rolling. And it develops these growth pathways. This tool has been used, I think there are more than 1.5 million different assessments have been conducted. Over 150,000 leaders have used the leadership circle profile in their development. Lots of people all over the world are using it. So it's really a fantastic tool.
Hey, Tim, quick question. On the 360-degree development, when you're getting the responses from the bosses, the peers, and the direct reports, do they get a separate set of questions, or do they all get the same level of question?
It's all the same questions that are used, and the results are all confidential. So, I wouldn't know how somebody scored me in a specific category. But yeah, it's all the same questions, and the key really lies in the calculations and the algorithms that are used in the background that sort of with the different categories. So if I have a category of peers versus others versus direct reports, they are rated against one another. And so you come up with a percentile of peers. And so you get a rating that shows, the percentile level or score that you're at compared to all other peers that rated the other person that's being assessed. Okay, so great. It is it's a very detailed tool, and they're really strict about their approach and the way they handle it. And they've done a tremendous amount of research with the data, which has just shown out to be pretty fascinating. We don't have time to go into all that today, but there's a great depth to it for sure. So, so the circle is divided into several different quadrants, and we'll look at them from a hemispheric perspective. Reactive styles on the bottom, as if you remember the adult stage of development, reactive were on the bottom, creative competencies on the top. And so the other spheres or hemispheres are left and right. So the competencies on the left side are all people oriented, and those on the right side of the circle are task oriented. And as a leader, obviously, you have to have a balance between people and tasks. And you got to get things done. That would be the task, but you do it through people as a leader. And so that's how the rating is set up. So let's look at the creative competencies first, and we'll talk a little bit through some of these. And you see here under the relating category, carrying connection, fostering team play, collaborative, mentoring, developing interpersonal intelligence. That information that's on this outer circle, those competencies. And the relating is sort of a summary circle, an inner circle we call it. And so we'll see as we go through these, each of these areas has an inner circle summary dimension, and then with the outer circle dimensions. And so relating, self-awareness, authenticity, we'll look over at systems awareness, and then finally into achieving. And so these competencies that we see are all rated and provide specific information and rated on each one of the categories. And the same applies to our relating styles or tendencies that we have. I'm sorry, not relating, reactive styles or reactive tendencies that we have. And so the same is true. We have complying, we have protecting, and then we also have controlling. And those are the competencies associated with those. And if you think about the competencies in reactive versus those in creative, I would much rather be working with a leader that has strong creative tendencies. It just is a happier place to be, and obviously more effective.
Makes sense.
So, in summary, this outside fear-based approach, outside-in development versus the inside-out or love-based. So those competencies on the bottom are all fear-based. I'm trying to protect myself. It's a place of safety. Those in the creative world, it's about love, compassion. It's expansion, freedom, a much more productive place to be in the creative. So if we look a little bit more, we'll do a little bit of evaluation, some tools of evaluation here. In the top, you see the shaded area in the red box or trapezoid. Those are the assessor's results, those shaded in blue. And then next to it there, the solid line, that's the participant result. And so you can see there's variation. The participant sees things differently than those that are giving the assessment of that person.
So Tim,
and then go ahead.
Tim, for clarification,
yeah.
the person who's getting the leadership profile assessment done, they also, and I know this because I did it, but they also take an assessment as well. And so
Correct.
you score yourself on a level of different marks there where those lines are, and then the other people that are scoring you and assessing your skill sets, they come as those shaded, so you can see the difference in the gaps.
That's exactly right, Jason. Yeah, that's right on. And then the outer circle and the inner circle, you see the scores, the shaded areas and the assessor or the participant solid line. Those are summarized on the inner circle. So this person has, showing here, and then this inside is a summary of all these results here. And the same goes for each one of these areas throughout the circle.
Great.
So let's jump in and let's look at Jason's results.
Yeah.
So Jason, this is from a year ago.
Yeah.
This is what was this? I think it was February of 2018.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So, so we've already talked about this. We've looked at it. We've spent I don't know how many coaching sessions we've had since then, probably a dozen or more. And so we've spent some time talking through this. But if you recall, when you first looked at this, what perceptions did you have? If you look at it from like sort of a 30,000 foot view, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
What do you see here?
So overall, I was, just knowing what the hope was, I was overall fairly happy with the fact that the majority of my results came in on the creative side, and I had hoped that after 25 years of being in a career and probably the last 15 being in a leadership role, or maybe even more than 15, I had some hope that I had learned some skills that may translate into the results. And so I was fairly pleased in general with seeing the results. There were a couple of glaring things that that I was unhappy with. There was also some things that really surprised me on my own assessment versus the assessment of the peers and bosses and direct reports and other people. And I had some fairly substantial gaps here that I didn't really expect to see. I felt like I was pretty in tune with who I was, and I think I was a little surprised at different areas. And I think that's something that you and I talked about a lot. My biggest thing that sort of was a shot in the ego maybe, and that I felt like I really needed to think about, was over in the self-awareness area as the selfish leader. And not only did I leave myself not a very strong result of that, but I also feel like that the people that I work with also didn't score me very high there as well. And so that was one of those things that I immediately said to you, wow, that one kind of hurts a little. I was self-aware enough to know that I probably wasn't a selfless leader as I should have been. But it still didn't feel good. And then on the other areas, some of the things that I pride myself on, like the strategic focus, and being a strategic thinker, those seem to line up pretty well, both in higher scores, and also my assessment between the systems thinker, the strategic focus, the visionary. That is the role that I play in our company. And so I was happy to see that my skill set matched there. And then as you go down towards the bottom, I had some massive discrepancies, where I was, a lot harder on myself than a lot of the people that are around me. So those were some revelations too, of me saying, gosh, maybe I need to stop beating myself up a little bit in those areas and really take stock of, I need to just let those things go. If other people aren't seeing it, I shouldn't spend a lot of time with it. So that's my 30,000 foot view of what my initial gut reaction was.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Fantastic. Appreciate those thoughts. And, I had similar thoughts as we first looked at this, that there were some big gaps that show up here. And so in general, there's some areas in which there's some self-awareness improvement that's potentially necessary.
Right.
There are other areas, like we were talking about over here in the strategic, in this upper quadrant or area here. This area here, that you are right on target. And isn't it interesting that is one of your super strengths, in my opinion? That's one of these areas, as I've gotten to really spend time with you and understand you, that you have just a gift in this space. I mean, it's a natural way of thinking, a way of communicating. You're highly effective in this. People recognize it, and you feel that way as well. You're right on target with where your assessors believe you are. So, as we think about the process of coaching and what that looks like, there's a couple of things that come to mind for me. So one, before you took the assessment and got your results, you were unaware. You did not have this feedback. You're just sort of flying blind, if you will, and you're in the middle of it all. So you don't really know. You don't have this idea of how people perceive you. So this 360 assessment provides you a gift, and it's a gift that's really beyond measure. It's just a fantastic thing that you can now see something that you didn't see before. And in psychological theory and all that kind of stuff, it becomes sort of a subject object or object subject perspective. You're in the middle of the forest, you can't see your way out of it. But now that you have this information, you can look at this data objectively. That becomes the subject. It's not you, it's the data, it's the information around these competencies, around these behaviors, if you will, that becomes so valuable. So now you're standing away from it. You can observe that, wow, look at this. Look at all these gaps down here in the reactive space. I'm spending a lot of time potentially thinking about these gaps, and your words, beating myself up over these things. So why don't I let that go? Well, so what happens if you are able to let that go? There's all sorts of emotional baggage and space. That space gets created. You're letting go of the baggage that's there. Now, is that measurable? I'm not really sure, but it's something that you really don't need to worry about. Well, so then I can take that emotional energy that is spent in some way or fashion, and I can apply it to something else. You mentioned that here in the selfless learner area, that hurt. All right, so let's investigate that. Let's figure out what that's about. Why is that only at a 33 or 34 percentile rating. Maybe that could be something that could be bumped up. And so what does that really mean, selfless learner? And how do I approach that? And how does that show up for me in my behaviors? So we let go of some things and we we take that energy and we move it to a place that we really want to explore or expand or investigate.
Right.
And so that's one way of approaching this coaching using this tool. And it creates a pathway. It creates a viable and a very tangible pathway for the coachee, for the client, for them to be able to say, that is what I want to focus on.
Right.
And so there's power in that. It becomes my one big thing, if you will, that's what I'm going to focus all my energy on. I'm not going to try to tackle 10 of these things, but I'm going to let go of some things, beating myself up, and I'm going to focus on this personal or this selfless learner approach and what that would entail. How does that show up? What are the behaviors that I need to enact in order to make that happen? You already have some of it going on here, but if it's something you want to enhance, then we can just dive into that a little bit.
Right.
So that's one thought. Jason, what do you say after hearing that? What are your thoughts that come to mind?
So, I mean, being a year and a few months out from that, it is exactly what you did. You helped me direct my focus away from some of the things that I was worried about that I shouldn't have been, and helped me develop in areas where it was on my conscience more so because I did have an awareness of it. So, as an example, with the selfless leader part, um, I was a lot more aware of in a conversation or when doling out projects or when thinking through with my business partner or somebody else, maybe stepping back a little bit and letting somebody else take some of the highlight, or allowing someone else to take on a project that I maybe would have wanted to take on, but really wasn't appropriate for me to take. Um, and so, I'm a very extroverted, um, very strong personality person, and I connect really well with most people. But sometimes I'm a little strong, and I know that. And I think with this awareness now, I was able um, to just keep that top of mind. And so when those types of things were coming up, I was able to adjust that a little bit. And then the other thing too, um, as we looked at in general, you have two people that own a business, Damon and myself, and then you've got other leaders in our company. Um, it also allowed me to really think through the idea of who should be responsible for which parts of the business. And so, as you pointed out very clearly, you were able to meet with Damon and I together, put our leadership circle profiles down and say, okay, guys, we know that everybody likes to do everything, but honestly, you both have very different skill sets and very different strengths. But let's tap into those strengths and let's apply the projects, the leadership moments, the way that we approach our positions, and let's look at, something as core and simple as our job description. What does Jason do in the company? What does Damon do in the company? Where will that help the company grow? And how will that affect the other people in the company if you take the highest level of what you can do and you take your strengths and you apply it in those areas? So to your point, and I think the biggest point and the biggest takeaway that I had was it's an awareness that allows you to make adjustments that make you a better leader and a better person. And that's my sort of summary of it all is creating an awareness for yourself so that you can, if you're interested in it, in self-improvement and in becoming a better leader, using that knowledge and that skill to adjust some things so that you're working with people around you and your clients and your customers and everybody else, to be more self-aware so that you're adding value at every point instead of dragging the process down or not adding value in areas where you shouldn't be interacting.
Yeah, some great points, great observations, and great learning that you've had
Yeah.
over this time. And if I think back so we've done a couple of offsites with the teams, with your team as well. And one thing that sticks out in my mind just so powerfully is you took the time to sort of define their roles.
Hmm.
So, back to your point of, you and Damon getting together and talking through what role works, who should be doing what. You also then took it to the next level down for your team so that they knew what their roles were. You bulleted it out bit by bit for each of them. And then we had a conversation about it and we went over it and made sure they were in alignment and they felt that is what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what I'm doing. Oh, there's a new thing here. Great. Let me take that on. I understand what that is. So that dialogue occurred, and it wasn't that you were controlling or that you were trying to put them in a box. It was just an explanation, creating a dialogue for them. That was so powerful. And in my mind, a very selfless leader kind of move so that they can operate on their own. And it wasn't you having to be in the middle of what they've got going on or anything of that sort, but you're allowing them that space by defining it and helping them to understand what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. Honestly, I feel like, because we put our entire leadership team through this process, you do. We did something in our last meeting that you led, which was how do you best communicate with people in different situations? Is it via email? Is it via phone call? Is it via chat room? Is it video conferencing? What is it? And that's going back to your last podcast, that's the micro of the macro of this whole thing to me. If I understand from that person that their strengths don't lie in specific areas and either they're responsible for those areas or they want to be in those areas, I have to do one of two things as a leader. I either need to say, I need to stop expecting you to be phenomenal in this area because that's not where your strengths lie. Or I have to work with that person to nurture the skill set to help them build that to get to the point where we need them in that area, because we can't always just say, well, let's fire the person and let's move on to the next person that's got that skill set, because then maybe we're losing 5 other skill sets that we actually need. And in a small company like ours, that's a reality. So, so that's been very helpful for us. And to your point about us basically bullet pointing out what people's jobs, the thing that struck me incredibly about that was not a single person in the room when we did our leadership team meeting knew what those job responsibilities were. And when we brought them in, we put them all up, and to a person, every single person said, yep, that's what I do, and that's what I do best. And wow, there's something on there that I'm not doing, but I understand why I'm going to be doing that because that's where my strength is. So that was really kind of cool to see everybody just go. At that point, there was no emotion in it. It became more about what's best for the company to move and propel the company forward, and how do we make the people that are at our company most successful so that they have a better quality of life. And that was my huge takeaway.
Yeah, and whether that be, like you had said, mentoring and developing, or providing them with tools, or creating a situation, or providing them with a client so they can learn it on the job, or whatever it is, whatever that approach is that needs to be taken for them. You understand that, and they understand it. So
Right.
you sort of create, it's in a way, it's sort of an unwritten contract. You're creating commitment to each other through that defining the roles and responsibilities. So that's just one example, I think, of there's some strategy in that as well. So creating some purpose and vision for them, but it's also a selfless leader perspective. It's not about you. It's about getting the work done, having the communications appropriate to make it happen for them. So, if we were to come back to the circle, and maybe I'll pull it back up again. if we were to go ahead and score um, score you again now, how do you think that would show up? Where would selfless leader be, and where would those bars be on the bottom in your mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would hope that, um, well, I can say for sure that my gut tells me that just being aware of being a more selfless leader has gotten me there. I mean, I could have taken this 5 minutes later and decided, um, that's where I'm gonna do a better job as a leader. And so I think I do feel like I will score and can score much higher in that area, and that people around me um, feel like I've gained, and I would feel like I could score it higher as well, because of that. And in the bottom areas, I definitely would not be as difficult on myself. And honestly, it's not as much even for me about being difficult as much as I would think to myself, maybe that stuff doesn't matter as much. And I really
Mm,
don't have to put that energy into it. So it's not even about beating myself up. It's more about, why am I so worried about some of those areas? Why don't I just embrace the strengths that I have, enhance those strengths, and then if I want to grow in specific areas, put the effort towards that. And so that that's how I would approach, you know, well, let me rephrase that. That's how I have approached the last
yes,
12, 15 months of looking at this and deciding how I wanted to change the way that I become as a leader.
that's great. That's great. And so some of this, I think the idea is really around um, what we're becoming, and what is my next step? How do I ultimately move to that? And backing off out of these areas that frankly they could be holding us back, although we may not know it. These areas that we rank ourselves, below, or with a big gap compared to what others perceive us. That could be holding us back. Just by the bare
Yep.
fact that we have these things going on, we're worrying about it or whatever it is. And so, that's something to consider. So, the other question that I've got, I'd love to understand your perspective on. So, let's assume that selfless leader moves up to the upper left. It goes out for both your assessment, and the assessment of others in the next round. Um, how do you think that might affect uh, personal learning, integrity, courageous authenticity? You
Yeah,
think there might be any effect on those by the mere fact that you're focusing in on this selfless leader?
absolutely. And on top of that, I feel like where it's actually been most visible is with our clients.
In
Um,
what way?
so there used to be an importance placed on, maybe me being in a meeting with a client, because the person that they felt like, had the answers was me, because I was the most vocal and stepped up and said, here's how we should handle something like this, or here's a creative process or something. And what I've been able to do over the past year is be in the room, but step back a little bit, do some mentoring, and allow somebody else to step up and this is a bad term, but expect or force them to take ownership, so that I didn't feel like I always had to take that role to continue to move the relationship forward.
So
Um,
you created space for them to jump into it.
yeah, and not only did I create space, but I made sure that they were more well prepared, because I didn't
Mm.
want for us to see, or I didn't want for a client to think that we weren't prepared for the situation. Then I would have to jump in and halfway through the meeting. Um, so that was very valuable. And I think, the people in my company, and Matt and Donna and Kim and Damon and everybody else, um, their level of engagement in the process with our clients has just gone up tenfold. Um,
Yeah.
and they feel more ownership. I feel like they do. I feel like they have stepped up and they've taken some of the things off of my plate that I probably shouldn't have been working on or doing. And again, it's not all about me. It's ultimately helped the company.
Yeah.
But I do feel like being aware of it allowed me to do some mentoring that I hadn't really been thinking about. I was just doing the work. Now I'm doing the mentoring so that more people can do the work, which makes us more productive, makes our clients more um, willing to have other people involved in the process,
Yeah.
and ultimately makes us a more valuable company at the end of the day.
Yes, and the word that comes to mind for me is scaling. It's scaling leadership. You're able to expand by giving away, creating a space for somebody else, mentoring and developing. Now you've got two people or three or four or five people that can do the same thing or similar things to what you were doing. You
Right.
can continue to move up. So this idea of scaling, um, as your consciousness and awareness and level of self-awareness goes up, then that creates space for others to fill that gap. And what a great concept that is. As we get better, we allow and create opportunities for others to get better as well.
Yeah.
So we're not the ceiling anymore, at least at that level. Now we moved up, and maybe we're a ceiling up here, and we got to continue to move up. But so
Yeah.
goes the growth path.
Yeah. And it's just been a great experience. I mean, I just can't recommend it enough to companies, the investment in it, that it just pays itself back so quickly. And ultimately, I think the sky's the limit. I mean, the growth and the vision that we've had this last year versus the first 4 years of the company's existence, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
And you were there for half of the fourth year, or the third year, I should say. um, you were involved with our team, so the difference between that and what we were able to accomplish last year is just completely different.
And I think the individuals, everybody, to a person, they've changed.
Yeah.
They're all different, and they're all operating in a different way with a different mindset, if you will, or at least greater self-awareness, so that they understand. Doesn't mean anybody's perfect, but they understand things in a totally different perspective, which is great. And that allows you as a company, GBC, to just continue to expand and to grow and to be better than you were 2 years ago.
Couldn't agree
So
more. Couldn't
yeah,
agree more.
yeah. So that's that this having a tool like this is valuable in that it provides these opportunities to be more self-aware. Now we can do coaching in a different way without the tool, a little bit slower, probably isn't as informative as quickly as it is with the tool, for sure. But this idea of object subject, I mean, you're in a space now where all those things that you were thinking about a year ago, you were wrapped in the middle of, you've solved those problems. They are, you're sort of pushing it down and creating this solution to it. Now you're on to something else. And that something else is still about understanding who you are and what it's going to be like in this new space as a leader with a different context, and having less worry about certain things and focused on greater creativity. And so we go from one spot to another, and then there's more to learn. I often think about that phrase, the more I know, the more I know that I don't know. It just keeps expanding. Now, if we take that into a context of the business world, and we talked about this before, this idea of VUCA, where the world is just, it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's ambiguous, it's so complex, and it's happening at such an incredibly fast changing rate of speed that it's hard to keep up with it. But if we as leaders don't continue to grow and to learn and become able to handle greater complexity, the world's complexity is just going to overwhelm us. and we'll be in over our heads before we know it. And so we have to continue to push forward to learn and to grow. And so from my vantage point, Jason, I look at you and at your team, and it's for a coach, it's a pleasure to be working with someone that has this kind of propensity and desire to continue to learn and to grow. It's an exciting thing from my standpoint as a coach, and I know it's an exciting thing for you and for your company as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. It's like I said, it's not just made me a better leader. I think it's made me a better person because you can't help but have it spill over to your personal life. You know, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your children, with your friends, with other family members. I mean, the whole thing just kind of spills over, and it's just always in the back of your head. Um, you know, everything's part of leadership in life, and the leadership part of it is, um, do you want to just get on the back of the truck and sit there and let someone else drive and figure out where your destiny is going to head you? Or are you going to at least sit in the cockpit with that person and give them some nudges every now and then and say, I'd really like to go over there,
Yeah.
And so that's
Well,
just the most simple, way to look at it, in my opinion.
yeah, and sort of this is probably a coaching way of looking at that. So who is that person driving? That is likely you driving, and you're, being all those internal thoughts and habits and all those things from the past. Those are the things that are driving you. They own you, and you're allowing them to own you until you become self-aware. And then you say, oh no, we're not going to have that. I'm going to own this. It's going to be my thing. I'm going to do it the way I feel like I need to do it. And when we start looking at life in that way, this whole creative idea, this growth in this self-authored perspective, if you will, that's what comes forward. And that is what this creative space is about. And this leadership circle profile, this tool helps us to get there. It helps us to become this aware, self-aware individual, and the impacts that it has on other people.
Sure.
So
Let me ask you a couple of quick questions that are just logistical questions.
okay.
How long does this normally take when you go through this process? Let's say that one person hires you to come in and do the leadership circle profile with them. How does the process work, and how long does it take?
Excellent question. In fact, I just started coaching an individual yesterday, and we just started this process. Yes, he asked the very same question. So I think we can get through it in as quickly as like 5 weeks, but it's typically a 6 to 8, maybe even a 10-week process if we have a lot of people involved. If there's a lot of clients that we're working with, but yeah, so you have to figure out who's going to be your assessors. Who are those people going to be? Send some information to them. Say, hey, I'm going to send you an assessment. You give them a week to do that, and so forth, and then we send an email out from the Leadership Circle Profile system, the TLC system, and that sends them the invite then to be part of the session, to be part of the assessment. And so then you give them 3-4 weeks to get out there and do it. It takes about 30 minutes, 45 minutes to go through the assessment. So it's not too extensive, but it's like 124 questions. And 3 of those questions are, sort of prose, if you will. The rest of it is all sort of check the box or highlight the dot as to where you feel people are. So it really goes rather quickly, but I tell you, the outcome, the information that's gained for the client is just fantastic. And so then, once we get the data, this is all computerized. They run it through their algorithms. The results come back. Reports get out typically the day after, electronically to the coach, and we can send either. If we want to send out paper copies, we can do that. It takes about 5 days to get them there, but electronically, and then we do a debrief. We go through what the tool is about. We go through the results, get the person up to speed, and then we start coaching from there. So
And
yeah, 6 weeks
and
probably is good estimate.
okay, and roughly how many people do you recommend at minimum that people would reach out to send the questionnaire?
Yeah, that's great. So really the minimum, I think the minimum is 8, but it really should be in the space of about 15 or 20 in my mind. I had one person do, I think it was 37 people, which was a
Wow.
lot. But it's just a matter of putting in their email address and their name and putting whatever category they're in. It's not too arduous as far as the input of the data and information. But yeah, 15 or 20 is typically a good number. You have to have at least 3 in each category for it to be for the data to come out in that category. So if I only had 2, that information would not show up, because then it really wouldn't be confidential. I'd be able to determine, okay, who, those are the 2, and they gave me those scores. And integrity and confidentiality is critical for this. So got to have at least 3 per category for it to show up.
Great.
So, I mean, we use the data, but it's just summarized. We don't see it in the
Sure.
specific. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let me tell you, this has been less painful than I thought it would be. But I appreciate, again, I appreciate the fact that it's one part science, one part art, and one part relationships with people, I think, that all lead to the result of this. And you do
Yeah.
such a good job of coordinating all of those pieces and putting them all in perspective so that you don't get hung up on any one or 2 or 3 things that you get so focused in on that you can't see the big picture for what it is. So you do a great job of that. If people wanted to use you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and maybe get this leadership circle profile done, or at least have a conversation about whether or not it could benefit them and their organization?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So best way to connect with me, email tim@alccoaches.com. My phone number, you can call me too, 704-995-3870. Yeah, either way to connect with me works. Yeah, I love doing this. This is a great it's a great experience coaching. This tool is fantastic. As you can tell, I've got a lot of energy and passion around tying our growth and development to these stages of adult development. It just is. It just makes so much sense to me, and it creates opportunities for our clients to just be able to see things that they couldn't see before. And what a wonderful thing. Just one more point that I've got. So, you mentioned the 3 different categories. That brought to mind a thought that as much as we might want to think that these things, the information that we have are true and they're assertions, they're just assessments, they're opinions. So they're ideas that we use to help us be better. It doesn't mean it's the truth. And this information is neither right nor wrong. It's not good or bad. Being creative or being reactive, it's not good or bad. It's a state of being. It's how we operate and how we see the world. And those are the things that really, I think, help to soften the blow in a way. And that it's a journey. It's a process. It's not about right or wrong. It's just about getting better. And that's a great perspective to hold. And I love that you and your team have that, because it makes the process really move rather rapidly as a result.
That's awesome. Well, and it's true. So I can't say it enough. So also to find Tim, alccoaches.com. Again, just mention there are 6 podcasts up as of right now. By the time you see this as a viewer, there will be 7. And they're all really good topics. Tim does a great job of just guiding us through some of the ways that he approaches what he loves. And I get to go along for the ride, which is super lucky for me. So I wanted to thank you for your time today, Tim. We did a little bit longer than we probably have in the past in the last few, but I think this was really valuable to make sure that we got in depth enough to really understand how valuable this tool could be. So, again, I want to thank you for your time today. And I look very much forward to our next podcast on the ALC Coaches podcast.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day, Tim.
You too.